All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to start adding our color in. And I have this picture here. I have that opened up in Photoshop just as a reference. So if you have any pictures, you can open them up so you can click back and forth to see what your colors are. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to determine where I'm going to start. And I'm going to start with a paint bucket. And I'm going to start filling in areas. So we had our line art here with our background erase. Make sure you make a copy of it. Just drag this down to the new layer palette and make a copy. So in case you mess up, you'll always have another copy of that line art. All right. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pick a color. Oops. Pick a color for my oars. Let's see. I'm going to go with this color. And then I'm going to click inside of my oar, and you'll see that I didn't do a really good job with erasing all of my unwanted marks, so it's not filling in all the way. So if that happens to you, then make sure that you could either erase better, or you're going to have to go in with a paintbrush and actually paint in those areas, which is kind of a pain. Say I want a little bit darker of a color right here. What I can do is double click here, and then I just bring this down a little bit, and that'll make a new swatch, and I can make that new swatch right there. And you might have to zoom in, okay? So maybe I want to do it right here too. All right, so if it doesn't fill in all the way, then what you can do, because I didn't really edit my drawing well at all. So I'm going to take a little teeny brush, and I can paint in the rest of this area here. So you got to make sure that's all the way up. There we go. There we go. But you want to try not to have to paint all of this. So do a really good job of erasing everything. And because I made a new swatch, it already shows up there. But if I want to go back here and add that in, I can. And I'll go over here, fix this up a little bit. But if that happens to you, you're just going to have to paint in those areas. You just don't want to paint over all of your lines. Okay. So let's pretend that that looks good, even though we know that I did a terrible job editing. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to take a darker color, and I'm going to add some shadow areas. So if I look at my original photo, you could see that all the shadow kind of happens on the right side and underneath here, right? So I'm going to go back to my picture, and I'm going to grab a darker brown, maybe that color. And then I'm going to grab a paintbrush, and I'm going to make the paintbrush nice and big. And then I'm going to make sure that my paintbrush, the hardness, we're actually going to airbrush these. So I'm going to bring the hardness down to 0, right? And then I'm going to make sure the opacity is not at 100. If it's at 100, look how dark it is. Ugh, terrible. All right, and then what I want to do is with the magic wand, before I paint, I want to select that area. So I'm going to select this area, and if I'm over here, it'll select more than one area at a time. So I'm going to paint this whole oar at one time. So back to my paintbrush. I have a nice big paintbrush, but I'm going to bring the opacity down maybe to like 46. And what I'm going to do is start by clicking and dragging along that edge. And it's only going to paint inside my selection. It doesn't paint anywhere else. All right? So you can go over that area more if you want to darken it. I can even go in with a darker color. You don't have to use just a darker version of that color. You can always use blue or purple or any color you want. But I'm going to do it nice and light. And I'm going to add a little bit of a dark blue to it. And I want you to play around with your shadow areas and have fun. All right, so I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to select my other oar over here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to take my brown, and I'm going to take my paintbrush, and I'm going to go, ooh, I have the opacity all the way down to 12. You can't see anything. So let me bring it back up to like 50-ish, 49. And I'm going to do that right side. And I'm going to go all the way down the side. And you could change the size of your brushes. So if you can't see that shadow, you can go in here and you can just add it just to the edge. Right? And add your shadow in. All right, so I'm going to deselect that. And then I'm going to look at my picture again. And I'm going to look here. See how it has almost like a gradient? It starts out light and it gets darker. You don't have to just fill it in with the paint bucket. You can fill it in with a gradient tool as well. So what I would do is I would select this area. I would go to my gradient tool, which is under the paint bucket. And then I'm going to pick a gradient. So if you don't have the gradient colors that you want, you select whatever colors that you want to try. And then say I wanted to go, I want this color to be dark blue. I could just select dark blue here. And this color I wanted to be like a pale blue or a light blue. And now I have a gradient from dark to light. All right. I'm going to go a little bit more turquoise with this one. So I'm going to go like that. I like that better. And then I'm going to say okay. And then what I'm going to do is pull in the gradient the way I want it to go. So I want it to start out light, just like the picture, and get darker by this line here. So what you can do is you click and drag in the direction you want it to go. Now I have the dark up top. I don't want that. I want the dark at the bottom. So click from the bottom up. And there you go. Now if you want less dark blue, click outside of the selection. All right, so that's just if you want to add gradient areas. You don't have to. You could just fill everything in with the paint bucket and that add some shadow areas to it. All right, and there's other things you can do. You can add patterns and textures, but I'll go over that with you when I see you guys next. All right, so that's it for now. Have fun.